Okay, so today we're going to look at questions from the lesson 4 problem set in module 2. And this lesson is called Efficiently Adding Integers and Other Rational Numbers. And so in class we learned this method about how to quickly add two numbers if they're both positive, or if they're both negative, or if one's positive or negative. One's positive and one's negative. So we're going to practice those steps. And if you look in the lesson summary just above where the problem set starts, it gives you some tips, or basically refreshes you of the method that we practiced in class. So I'm not going to go over that. I'm just going to do it. Find the sum, show your work to justify your answer. Not really sure how I'm supposed to show my work on 4 plus 17. It equals 21. Both of those are positive. I just add them like we've been doing our whole lives. Now, -6 and -12, this is a chance to practice one of the methods we learned in class. We learned that if both numbers you're adding are negative, you can sort of ignore the negative signs at first and just add their absolute values, which would be 6 and 12, which equals 18. But since both numbers you added were negative, the sum has to turn out negative. And so you just put a negative sign on there. That's sort of, I don't like using the word trick, but if you want to call it a trick, you can think of it as that. Now we have one here where one of the two add-ins, things that we're adding, is positive and the other one's negative. And so the method we learned for that is to just subtract their absolute values. Subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value. So I guess I can show my work on how I'm using the method on this one. What we're really going to do is 3.7 minus 2.2. And I know that's weird that we're using subtraction to complete an addition problem, but if you get used to using this method, it's actually a really fast way of doing it. So 3.7 minus 2.2 is 1.5. And now I have to decide, is this sum going to be a positive 1.5 or a negative 1.5? And it all depends on which of these two numbers that I added had the bigger absolute value. And since the negative number had the bigger absolute value, then I know my sum must be negative. So it's going to be negative 1.5. Okay, and then on D, I'll use the method for adding two negative numbers first to handle -3 and -5. So I just do 5 plus 3, or 3 plus 5, I guess, which is 8. But since these are both negative, I get -8. And then I still have to add that positive 8 at the end, but those are additive inverses, and so I know that that automatically is going to be 0. And then this last one, I have a positive number being added to a negative number. So I'm going to subtract their absolute values, and then I'm going to determine whether my sum at the end, well, it's a difference because I'm subtracting, but it's a sum because I'm using this method. I hope you understand what I'm saying. But that answer that I get at the end will be determined, whether it's positive or negative will be determined by which one of these has greater absolute value. So let's do 2 and a fourth minus 1/3. I like to use improper fractions, so I'm going to do 4 times 2 is 8, plus this 1 on top. That's 9/4 minus 1/3. And so I'm going to need a common denominator to be able to complete the subtraction. So I'm going to multiply the top and bottom of this fraction by 3. So I get 3 times 9 is 27. 3 times 4 is 12. And then I'm going to multiply both top and bottom of this fraction by 4. So I get 4/12. And that equals 23/12. And I can just leave my answer as an improper fraction. You don't have to convert that back to a mixed number. And so now I just have to decide, is this answer positive or negative? And since the negative number had the greater absolute value when I started, then this answer will be negative. I prefer if you write your negative signs level with your fraction bar, but I didn't really leave myself space because that equal sign's in the way, so I'll put it up top. All right. Number 2, which of these story problems describes the sum 19 plus -12? Check all that apply and show your work to justify your answer. Okay, the first one says Jared's dad paid him $19 for raking the leaves from the yard on Wednesday. Okay, so he gained 19 yards from that, or $19 from that. And then he spent $12 at the movie theater on Friday. How much money does Jared have left? This makes sense to me. It sounds like he gained 19, which would be positive 19. And then he spent 12, so that could be represented with a negative 12. Not 100% sure how they want me to show my work on that. I'm just going to check it because it works. Number 2, or the second option, I guess, says Jared owed his brother $19 for raking the leaves while Jared was sick. Jared's dad gave him $12 for doing his chores for the week. See, this sounds backwards to me because when you owe someone, that sounds negative to me, and I'm supposed to be looking for one that has a positive 19. And then also it says Jared's dad gave him $12. When someone gives you something, then you sort of receive that, and I think of that as positive, and I have a negative 12 here, so I'm not checking that one. That sounds backwards for show. And then the last one says Jared's grandmother gave him $19 for his birthday. That's starting good so far. We've gained a positive $19. He bought $8 worth of candy. Okay, so he spent 8. That's a negative 8. And then spent another 4 on a new comic book. So this one I guess I can show some work on just to check it. So he's gaining 19, but then he's spending 8, which we can represent with a plus negative 8. And then he's spending another 4, which we can represent with plus negative 4. And this is the same as 19 plus, well, the method for adding two numbers that are both negative is just add their absolute values, 8 and 4, and then put a negative sign in front because they were both negative. So this is 19 plus negative 12, and that's exactly what we wanted. So I will check that one. All right, let's go over to the other page. It says use the diagram below to complete each part. So for all of question 3, I suppose. A, label each arrow with the number the arrow represents. Okay, I prefer the term vector, but whatever. So this vector is starting at 0 and going to positive 5, so that's the easy one. That's a 5. Now this one, I like to see how long the vector is. That's the way I do it. So it's starting at 5, and I'm going to count the spaces. 1, 2, 3. So I know it has length 3, and it's pointing in the negative direction, so that tells me that vector represents the number negative 3, or adding a negative 3. And then here, I'm going to count the vector of this top one, the length of this top vector. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the length of this vector is 7. It's pointing in the negative direction, so that vector is representing negative 7. B, how long is each vector? Which direction does each vector point? Okay, so I kind of already did this. They should almost ask you this before they tell you a label, whatever. So the length of arrow 1 is 5. The length of vector 2 is 3. The length of vector 3 is 7. And this one is in the positive direction, and these two are in the negative direction. So write an equation that represents the sum of the numbers and find the sum. Well, I don't have to do anything to find the sum because I know that where this last vector ends is the sum. So whatever I write better equal negative 5. And I'm going to write 5 plus negative 3 plus negative 7, going in the order of closest to the number line, moving my way back. And I'm pretty sure just by checking in my head, but I'm also sure because of this diagram, that the sum of those is negative 5. Okay, you know what? I think I'm going to leave question 4 for you guys. I think I've done enough of these for you. All right, that's it.